there. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Are you sure you're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Just checking.
Doing double duty today, so.
Double duty.
Yeah, learning how to do double duty.
Double duty. You know, it'd be really great if you learned double duty in other areas too.
Okay, let's not get there. I'll start the show.
Hey, Soul Questers. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of a Soul's Quest podcast. This is Jessie and this is Omar.
Hello, Soul Questers.
Your hosts and co-hosts of today's episode.
Awesome. You're in a joking mood.
I am I don't know. I feel funny today. I don't know why. I mean, I'm not. I don't think I'm a comedian or I'm funny.
Oh, you think like a funny, like I amuse you funny? Like what? Like
I don't know.
funny?
I'm just in a fun.
Funny how? Funny like funny how? Funny how?
I think I'm just excited because because I don't have to work tomorrow.
Oh.
I'm rubbing that into people who are watching. But
perfect. Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. So what are we doing here today?
Today, I want to talk about incivility.
Incivility. That's a very good, broad topic.
Yeah. Well, you could say that.
And what is it that you want to talk about with regards to the incivility?
Well, I think that first and foremost, in today's world, there's a lot of that going on. Okay. And I'm not saying it didn't go on before. I think it's just now with social media, the presence of incivility is more
prevalent.
It's prevalent. Yeah. It's definitely out there and you sort of feel it more than perhaps you did in the good old days, my time, our time.
But I mean, I think it's all generational too, right?
Yeah.
It's the exposure of the generation prior to us was so limited in terms of technology and in comparison to ours, right?
Definitely.
I mean, our generation grew up with cassette tapes and VHS, right? And LP players, the other.
Now there's streaming. Now there's
yes.
access to stuff is just like it's instant gratification everywhere.
Yeah, plus you communicate. I mean, in regards to communicating, right? Our methods of the transitions to life are similar, but our exposure to our environment, generationally speaking, changes. So. Incivility was progresses with the technology as well. Yeah. As the technology involves our access to be able to express ourselves and say things unfiltered, has broader channels to getting out
Definitely,
there.
because in the older days or in other generations, speaking your mind was considered taboo. You didn't necessarily do it. Was dangerous. Yeah. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about that because I think a lot of people experience incivility in different ways. Yeah. And it's sort of important to highlight that because I think people are frustrated by that. You know what I mean? Because I think people want to have a voice. I think people want to be able to say how they feel. Yeah. But there's a thin line there.
Yeah. I mean, to me, whenever just like that's the problem is that it's like, wow, how we are. Our problem right now is that we live in a society that has become very static, right? So you're either this or you're either that, right? So when you become that static, that you become that set on your belief system, right? There's no way that you're going to be open to a separate point of view. Right. Right. I mean, a perfect example is our politics, Yeah,
that's exactly
it's a perfect. So how could you have a dialogue with someone that's static, right? And they're both static because I'm either this or I'm either that. Right. And any idea that segues away from that.
And not even that. There are some people who are very bipartisan and they want to sort of engage on both sides.
Yes, but the prevalent position right now, it's that of conflict and separation. Yeah. And it's not just in politics. I mean, if you go back to the beginning, right? Because, words have meaning and they have a limited meaning, right? So what does it mean to be civilized, right? Like obviously, a civilized person belongs to a civilization, right? Right. And if you go all the way back, I mean, ironic because I have a book back here that's called Man's Rise to Civilization. So, gotcha. And the idea is that they go back to the beginning of time of how groups of nomads and individuals came together to be able to survive,
Right.
And their idea of survival was different back then than it is for us now.
Right. Definitely. Right? Yeah, of course.
But the foundation of a civilization starts with a group of people focusing on a combined good. And that combined good in that primeval time was survival. So a few episodes ago, we talked about evolution, right? And the selfish gene.
Right.
So that selfish gene was the catalyst to bring people together in order for them to survive. Because again, you out there in the open, you are either in the junk. It's dangerous.
Dangerous world.
You could get killed from a beast, or you could just get killed from an ant bite.
Right.
And everything in between. So we have to be able to survive. So now think about this happening throughout the world in different pockets with different people. So that's when you begin to get tribes, right? And you begin to evolve from tribes to nations. Now these nations are beginning to evolve, and they have a certain belief, and then the separation, and then you see where we're getting at, right?
Yeah, we're progressing.
We have evolved into from an idea of survival and thriving. Now, although we might survive, we don't have to face those threats on a daily basis. We still have that tribal mentality.
Yeah.
And that's where the incivility, in my opinion, comes through. And this is where it starts. It starts because if you have a belief system, like let's have this argument right now, right?
So if this tribe has this belief system, and this tribe has that belief system, you're saying then that's where incivility comes into play, because if they voice or do something behavior wise or speak it, then this one is going to react to that.
Yes.
And so there's no sort of proactive behaviors that exist. That's just coming at each other to protect their tribe.
Exactly. Right. That is a perfect example. And that is what happens when you break it down and you start applying that same mentality to all the conflicts, right? To a lot of conflicts. So let's say at work, right? I mean, this is one of the things. Like, what are some of the examples of issues that people deal at work when it comes to incivility?
Incivilities that happen at work can be they can be very covert. Okay, they're but they at the end of the day are insidious.
Okay,
they're very damaging to an individual. So, for example, you have a boss who doesn't give credit where credit is due, takes the credit for himself, but then has no problem pointing out, you did something that you shouldn't have done, or this wasn't done correctly, or whatever. No problem. Condescending, somebody who brings you into a meeting, but then, and you share all your ideas, and then you don't implement those ideas, or you don't even take pieces of those ideas and say, oh, you know what, that's a great idea. How about if we use that with this and work together? Instead, you just ignore that and you just sort of push them aside. I don't even know what's that called when you just
dismiss them.
Dismiss that's a dismissal.
You delete them.
Dismissal. That's not it. So you make them feel like they're relevant, but you bring them into the conversation, or sometimes even worse, you don't even bring them into that.
Yes.
You just don't even
include them.
You don't include. There's complete, and instead of inclusion, there's totally the opposite. They're not part of it at all. Meanwhile, they're a part of the team, part of the organization, part of whatever work environment that is. But they don't feel that way. They feel excluded. That is incivility. They feel superior.
So here's
in the workplace, that's incivility.
In the workplace. So that's
minimal stuff. Because there's also, you can go on, it's a borderline, because bullying and incivility, there's comparisons there. Some people would say, but there's borderline stuff that exists.
And again, when you go back and you look at those group of people, and their idea is we need to survive. So there's rules, there's regulations that we created in order for the totality to survive, right? As we have evolved, and we have some ties to some things, and sometimes to others. We have control our environment now. So that need of survival, like there's going to be a lion coming to get us. So we all have to be alert.
Right.
That fear is no longer there, right? So what happens is now you start looking at each other, and you're going to start protecting yourself, and you're going to have, you start putting yourself in castes, in categories, right? That makes some people better than you in the totality because, well, I felt, let's say, there's two of us here and we're protecting each other, but now the threat is gone. There's no threat. Mm-hmm. We've tamed nature, we've tamed everything. Mm-hmm. There's no threat to our group. Mm-hmm. Well, my name is Omar and I did a lot more than Jessie did, so I should get two more times the land that Jessie's gonna get. That's gonna get because I did more work because she slacked once,
right?
Or because she's a woman. Mm-hmm. And she's always, and we had to protect her more because when she was pregnant, we all had to be surrounded. So she's weaker than me because I stayed up when she was doing something else. Mm-hmm. So you could see how that mentality of superiority starts permeating a civilization, right? Yeah. And now that you don't have
it's a cancer.
It's a cancer, but it's an existential. Now that you don't have any existential threats, right? Now you just start turning on each other.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then you go to a court. Now you no longer are defending physically the environment. Now you begin to protect and defend abstract things like ideas. Yeah. So you start protecting. Oh well, I'm the preferred group of God, or no, I'm the preferred group from God, or we are the ones that were giving all this stuff. You start putting yourself above the rest because after that, you can't protect anybody else but you as an individual anymore because everybody else is going to be fine.
Right.
So you see what I'm saying? So when you start thinking about civility, it's the fact that the problem really is that we are losing because we are so connected. And we're so aware of what everybody's doing around us.
Yeah, we're literally connected to people in ways that, literally, I learned today, and this is so like elementary and probably not even relevant, but I learned how to put my phone on Do Not Disturb so that at a certain time at night, it just
shuts
down. I don't get any phone, nothing.
Yep.
No vibrations, no nothing. Mm-hmm. Because we're so connected that this stuff is happening like at all hours of the night. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that's probably not a very good example.
No.
But it just goes to show how much noise is out there. Mm-hmm. And if you Do Not Disturb once in a while and done, I'm not doing this, then those things permeate the very essence of like, you don't even have time to take in what's happening.
Yep.
You're not self-aware. You're not you're not thinking about that.
Yeah. But here's this is so cool to me because it's so at this stage it's like so evident, right? How we've evolved. And so I told you about different people have different ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And they protect those ideas and they believe this idea is the idea. They fail to recognize that time continues on, right? And at that moment in time, they feel that they're justified because for whatever many reasons to believe what they believe, and then consequently look at another person and say, no, you're wrong. No, I'm right. You're wrong. I'm right. So when you have those two types of people, how do you come to understanding that life keeps going? You won't be able to have that conversation. And you see it time and time again. For instance, the other day I was asking for someone and we were talking about the different religions. And I said a statement that to me is just like, whatever. It's like, the Muslims, the Christians and the Jews, they all have the same God, right? And they looked at me like, what? Mm-hmm. It's the same God. I'm like, what do you mean it's the same God? Well, biblically it's the same God, Mm-hmm. There's just different prophets.
Right.
And this young person looked at me, so if it's the same God, why are they fighting? Very good question. Somebody feels that they're superior than the next. Mm-hmm. The idea of land, the idea of the most important place, the central place. So then you start figuring out all these artificial differences, right? That gives us the conflict, and now put that on top of the interconnectivity of stuff, that the only person that you look around you and you feel like, oh my God, I'm just going to focus on me. Because that's what everybody else is doing.
So what's conceived out of that is, from what I'm understanding, what's conceived from that or born from that then is selfishness.
Yeah, because now what are you looking at? It's like, who are you protecting? It does, like, your life is insignificant in the interconnectedness of it all.
Right.
It's insignificant. So I'm gonna do me. Right? I don't care about this idea. I don't care about the fact that, you have a CEO that might be at that position, right? And they know that they're killing the environment, and they're doing it just because of the artificial idea of a perpetual growth in the economy.
Right.
Now, is that person really looking out for, again, going back to the group, the civilization, the tribe that protects everybody? Are they really looking for that? Or now, because, well, everybody's doing the same thing, and I have to be number one top.
Right. And then people have to.
Everybody else, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I cut you off.
No, it's like, so the rest of the civilization doesn't matter.
Right.
Because we are so interconnected and so disengaged from the reality that what the actions that we do, that we take collectively, even in those individual tribes, because right now the biggest issue, I think, is tribalism in our society. And what's happening, and where you see so much conflict, is because we are evolving past the idea of tribalism and separation and merging into really the only one tribe that matters, which is the, Gaia, the entire being that is our planet.
Right.
And that is our universe.
Right.
And so all this incivility that you see stems from that, but it doesn't come from a logical place. And this is what a social quest is about. So when you think about all this anxiety, all these pressures, all these things to, like, oh my God, I can't breathe, the depression, the suicides, is because our soul, the internal universal part of us knows that this is not it. You need to keep moving forward. The lifestyle that we live, the incivility, the thinking that I am the most important person in the world and my ideas are the only ones that matter, those things are coming to an end. And you might see, you see the flamboyance, the artificialness of like how everybody is going to, that stuff is going to come to an end. One day people are going to start realizing that this artificialness of how we begin to look, we're gonna get old. It's gonna get tired. It's gonna get old, and we're gonna realize that that's not the way to go. That's not the way to go.
Why do you say that?
Why do I say that?
Yeah, do you think that our generations that are coming after us are actually thinking that way? They're so involved in social media and fake this, fake that. You don't even know what's real and what's not real. Yeah. And how you think that's going to go away? Every generation goes through their transitions, right? But every generation that I know of so far in my time, I won't say how many generations that is or decades that is, but have all been about that. It's always been that.
But because it's transitional, right? So again, one of the things that we talked about when we talked about SKR, when we talked about the Soul's Quest, and one of the premises is that we look at the transitions of people through the stages of life, right? From dependency to self-reliance, adulthood, to maturity, and then the transition into death, right? We talk about those stages. Now, those stages don't change per generation. They're the same stages.
Correct.
Right? What changes mostly is the environment, right? So, like, our generation didn't have to deal as much with the interconnectedness of it all, right?
Okay.
The generation prior to that, for them to get from one place to the next was hell. It's very few people could fly airplanes, and very few people own cars. The generation before us all they knew was tribalism, right? Before that, they knew that, this is black, this is white, this is separate. Now that we're transforming and our environment is changing, we're beginning to lose that tribalism, right?
Yeah.
Like definitely. I was saying. Yeah. So the generation that you see right now, they're just going from in their transition, right? From dependency to adulthood. So this is never, it happens every single time, right? So in our generation, and I believe we're Generation X's, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just going to just put Generation X's, right?
Yes.
In our Generation X's, we had our artists and we had our people that we looked up to, right? You know, if you look at hip hop, the biggest, the most culturally powerful, one of the most culturally powerful things in hip hop was Scarface. So you see a lot and mafia characters. So you see that same thing. You know, you see, you know, with the music, you see the change in there too. That it was rebellious, right? It was that rebellious, that impulsiveness, that roar, and as the environments change and social norms begin to change too, you have these individuals, you know, Generation Zs right now, that are going through the same thing, but because we have evolved and they have been so exposed to so much so quickly, they will eventually understand that that's not going to last.
Right. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah. I was just asking the question just because you know, I have to challenge you, so to speak, because I think everybody gets to that place where they realize that what was important to them at one point isn't necessarily important to them anymore. The
problem also now, that's one thing, right? They'll continue to evolve.
Right.
The issue is that now the environment has changed so much. Because we are no longer focused on that small tribe. There's that group, that tight knit group, has dispersed so much that now we don't know exactly where we fit in, and that's where the problem lies.
So what I was saying before, just to make sure that we understand, is that I understand what you're saying, but what I was trying to say earlier, and maybe we're on the same page, is that every generation experiences different things. So, you know, 70s, 80s, we were dealing with like Madonna, you know, the whole punk crazy hair. I mean, I had that hair. Yes, in the 80s, I did have that hair. And the 90s, it was a different experience, you know, Backstreet Boys and all, you know, like I'm referring to music just to show progression. Yeah,
it's the cultural
and
progression.
Like, you know, the Biggies and whatnot. And then you have like the Gen Zers now who
millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah, who like literally were born into the technology and what they're and there is a lot more noise in
than it used to be
than there has ever been. I mean, the kids, the Gen A, I think it's Gen A's that are coming up, that they don't have, they're not going to have a clue as to how difficult it used to be to make a phone call when you and I were making phone calls. We had to stand against the wall and listen, you know, talk to our boyfriends or girlfriends with an the cord. Yeah. Because, you know what I mean? That's all they know.
This is what I'm referring when it comes to evolution, right? Because you have in everything that you mentioned right there,
right?
You have the evolution of of religion. I'm going to just call it religion, spirituality, and our understanding of our place in the universe, right? So you have that, and you have an evolution of that, right? So what that does is that it changes the way that we interact. Our morality changes as we progress through those things, right? Then you have the evolution of society, of culture in particular, right? So that music begins, you know, I mean, if you look at the 60s where it was very romantic music, you know, the 80s was more partying, 90s, and now it's just like turn over and eat the stuff like it's groceries, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
Because the culture...
What song is that?
I don't know. Just kidding. You know, the culture has changed, and again, it's opened things up as to how we feel. And now, in addition to that,
and how we perceive things,
and because now, when it comes, well, if everybody is just like that, and all they care was about this, then why should I care about my next person? So remember that idea of people creating a civilization, so to maintain their survival, which is the premise of it all. that idea begins to dissipate.
Right.
It doesn't go. So then you have the evolution of science, the evolution of technology, the evolution of understanding, you have those three things, and those three things, as people progress and they still are going to their own cycle of individual evolution, that environment changes and those ideas begin to change, and we become so more disconnected from the fact that we started as a band,
as a unit,
in order to survival. This is no longer about survival. So this is why people are confused, and this is why people are fighting against each other.
So you're saying that people are more, this is weird to say because it's we're not, but we are more isolated.
We are more isolated. Right. Yes. And then when you become...
So there's not that human interaction.
No, it's not so much the human interaction, but it's the understanding of the evolution of us as a universal tribe more than individual groups.
Right. The cohesiveness.
Exactly. And this is what keeps us in I mean, even though we are so advanced in a lot of aspects in technology and life and all that, we're still very uncivilized because we act like animals against each other.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I was just telling you earlier, you can't even go to Publix without somebody wanting to run you over with a cart like that. Well, it wasn't Publix, it was Walmart, but it can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
But it was like, I'm there and I'm just, the lady was really rude to me. And I said, excuse me. I think she thought I was being rude, but I said, excuse me, I'm in a hurry. I'm doing something, whatever. And it just, that interaction just left me like, Jesus, I'm just shopping. That's it.
But the problem is that we have become, a lot of people talk about the idea of community and country, right? But you notice when the only time that people really come together like that is when something horrible happens, right? Yeah. It's tragic. You almost need that collective threat, right? That brings people together. We're going back to that elemental part that civilization was meant for the survival of the group, right? Not just individuals. But only when we have existential threats do we come together, right? 9/11, it was a perfect time of like American unity. 10 years later, everybody wants to kill each other, right? We split like 50-50, right? Because where's that existential threat?
Right.
Where's that insecurity that brings people together? Because we've conquered every corner of our world. We don't fear anything, and there is nothing to fear except what's out there in space.
Yeah.
And we don't even know, we're beginning to kind of like go past that fear.
Yeah.
So when you don't have those barriers, what's the incentive for people to be nice to each other?
And that's a good question. What is the incentive?
That's the question.
So that is the question. What is the solution to that? What's the solution to that when there's so much noise and so much stuff going on? You said static earlier, but I think static, like the snow on the TV. People may not know what that is, but that noise that is constant.
So here's the first thing, right, that you see happen all the time. Again, you follow the history of civilization, and this happens constantly, right? Some people who are bright get together and say, "Oh my God, this is a problem." The way to fix this problem is to create a system. And a lot of the times it happens just organically. It's not, something that happens this methodically. A lot of the times it happens organically. So a system like, let's say, tribalism. Right? We have a chief, well, we have a king, we have peasants, we have the caste system all the way down, and that keeps order to maintain the society. Okay. Right? But sometimes people at the bottom start saying, wait a minute, this is not fair. So that's when the revolutions come around, right? So, and you keep having revolutions after revolutions after revolutions, and you still have the disparity because, remember, at the beginning, we were protecting ourselves against the evils of the outside world, right?
Right.
So you could see that on the micro level, how that begins and how civilizations begin to grow, but also as we have progressed and things have progressed, that we become more separate. So the solution, right, and it's hard to reach a solution, right? Because what are you going to do? Create a system in which you mitigate all these issues and balance it out. And we've tried that. We've continued to try those things.
And this isn't a linear issue.
Yeah, it's not a linear issue. So even if ironically enough, I was listening to a channel called the Academy of Ideas on YouTube, and the feed that came up was about the book A Brave New World. Right, and Andrew Huxley, and the idea,
like the movie A Brave New World.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's just he was talking about the book that was back in the 30s, and then the remastered one,
right,
in the 60s. And the idea was that all the way up to this point within the last 100 years, religion was that idea that centers society, right? Mm-hmm. Now, as we progress and we go into more technologically advanced parts. Now it's science that dictates kind of like society. So what are we going to do? Are we going to start randomly assigning people categories as to where they function and where they belong?
Right.
And then what? Because we want to. There is an importance about bringing that cohesiveness together, because people are more civil when we're working towards something.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
It's so basic, but it's true.
But you think about aligning. How do you align 7 billion people into that form of life in a systematic type of way? It's not going to work,
right?
Because everybody has different needs and desires, But if you look back to Watchmen, the movie, right at the very end, when Ozymandias, what he did was he faked Dr. Manhattan, sending the nuclear bombs everywhere, because the way that situation within these two tribes at the time, the U.S. and the USSR, right? The only solution to that problem was for them to have a common enemy.
Right.
Or to have something common to fight against.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And going back to what I said earlier, the issue that we have is that we don't have that anymore. There's the only threat that we see right now is the threat of the person right next to us.
Exactly.
And
or ourselves.
Ourselves. So
sometimes we can be our own worst enemy.
Yes, and we are. But now we're looking at existentially who we're competing against.
Yeah.
And what are we competing against for? And then you have that same stuff, that same brutality of natural competition that we yet haven't evolved from that.
No, we haven't.
And you see it.
I was just gonna say that we haven't come off of that. We just haven't.
No, we haven't yet evolved to that, and somehow the only thing that I understand or that I've come to accept that could begin to make the shift is the individual.
Yeah,
it's the person. It's like you.
So it's not this solution is not in the macro level. It's at the micro level.
Correct.
And I agree with you 100% because I think that it's important in any situation. I think that these solutions begin at the individual level.
Yeah.
Because until we understand what our contribution is and what our effects are in a situation, whether it's a small, minute situation, it could be a relationship, it could be in your work, and then it can go into the micro or the macro level.
Yeah.
Until we know what our part is in that, our role is, and what our responsibility is in that, nothing's going to change.
No, nothing's going to change.
And the problem is that now you're asking people to take responsibility for their behaviors, and a lot of people, sadly, don't take responsibility for that or aren't thinking about the fact that they have that much power that they exercise on other people and in situations.
Yeah, but there's this movement lately. I think we were talking to Dr. Ruther a couple of weeks ago about the fact that there's this movement about, well, if I don't have free will and things are just what they are, then I'm just going to react the way that I'm going to react, then why should I even bother? Right?
Yeah.
And this is a very nihilistic way of looking at things. Like, it's like, well, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. And whatever, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. I'm just going to just do. I don't have to think. I'm just going to just do. Right. And And again, it's like when you look at the reasons for our mythologies and our religion and our social structure is to be able to maintain that cohesiveness within our society. But now our society exponentially has grown, and we can no longer look at the race part, and we can't always cop out behind the idea of just ideas. Either there will be scientific ideas, like what's that thing now, eugenics and things of that nature. We can't hide behind the idea that one race is better than the other. This is the idea of a collective, and that individual is the only person, because again, you have come across a lot of people that are in situations of that they have limited power over somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, it's very uncivil when you have a situation like that, and then you're what instead of understanding that you arrive at the situation of quote unquote power, yes, by effort, but mostly by chance,
right?
Because we don't want to accept the fact that fortune plays a big role in the situations that we're in, right?
And luck has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and again, it's like, how do you categorize this thing? Oh, well, people will say, well, I'm chosen. I was chosen to be. I was given this. So your chosen means that you are better than the next person.
Well, it implies
that, right?
They may not say it, but
they may not say it. So if you have a situation that, and this is just my own personal philosophy of how I see things and how things could improve systematically, I don't think there's a system that will create a world that'll be utopic. It just won't happen.
Of course not.
Right? Yeah. So you're going to have conflict is always going to be. The idea is that if as an individual you minimize the pain, right, which is what we talked about before.
Yeah, several times.
You minimize the pain. You understand that and a lot of the times we don't feel that we have this power. Like, you have the power to influence a certain amount of people in your world. Definitely. And you could do that for the better. You could do that for the worse. So if you are out there and if you don't understand situations, like I mean, I give you an example, right? Like I don't know why I'm thinking Scarface, but every time I see talented people just really misunderstanding what Scarface is, like Scarface is not a hero story, it's a tragedy. It's like there's a difference between these types of movies, and I know that he has this connotation of, oh, he was the end all be all of whatever, the idol. Right. I'm gonna go down fighting and all that stuff. Dude, people, this is a tragedy. It's not a hero story. It's a tragedy. It's the greed, the need for power, and that temporary illusion that you're better than the next person. Ultimately will be your demise. Yeah, and not just your demise, but the demise of everything around and everyone around you. Mm-hmm. Kill the sister. I mean, his best friend is dead. So if power is that you're going to have the power, right, to either make the people around you better or destroy them. Yeah. Which one are you going to choose, And no system can mitigate that, because internally we have to fight those demons, and we have to be able to understand it. But generationally, that's been the same things that we have, that generationally as a collective we had to overcome. Right. But the way that we've done it is through individuals, and individuals kind of like setting a better mark as to how we should be, and the generation that's currently needs those models, but those models don't come from like previous generations. It takes people within the generation to stand up, and wherever they are, in whatever position that they're in, they begin to think about that part that even though we might feel isolated and disconnected, we're part of this whole big thing. Mm-hmm.
So basically what you're saying is that our mindset has to change. Mm-hmm. That there has to be a flip or a switch that has to be turned on or whatever. Yeah. That we understand that that's our role. Mm-hmm. Because then that's our responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's our responsibility.
See, like, again, it's like when evolution happens, it doesn't happen in this big boom thing. It happens in a really small,
very like incremental.
And again, it's the focus of the West, right? The philosophy of Western civilization, why we are civilized, right? Is the focus on the individual,
right?
The person making a choice, right? To set a standard that is above the average and the status quo for the betterment of the whole.
Right.
That is the promise of Western civilization, right? That is the promise. That's why we all much rather live in the West, right? So you have to understand that idea of the individual taking responsibility, because there's people that are over rich that take advantage of the system. But there are people who are uber poor as well that also take advantage of the system.
Right.
You know? And there's everything in between. So the idea is not to put ourselves against the extremes. It's to be able to understand that in human nature, we are going to have those things. Yeah. And we have to accept both extremes because they're there. They're there. You know, there's big corporations that take advantage of the system at the expense of the whole. And there are individuals who much rather stay at home receiving a check and just chilling than going out of work. Those two realities are like the opposing points of views of both liberals and conservatives, right?
Yeah.
There's truth to both.
Yeah.
There's gotta be there's a middle ground, and the reason why there has to be a middle ground is because those two extremes are hazardous to the totality. The tribalism of this against that is hazardous against our collective society. But it's the individual. It's that person that is there presented at the moment to have the courage and to have the wherewithal to stand up and say, nah, we can't do this like this.
Right.
You know, I gave you like to just kind of like wrap this up. I gave you like a little story that I've seen in The Power of Myth, the message of the myth, right at the very end. There's a Hindu god, right? His name is Indra. And Hindus have a lot of different gods, and you know, your Brahman and sitting in the lotus and all that. So that's like the ultimate creator of the universe. But they all have different gods because all those different gods they symbolize different energies. But whatever. So you have this god Indra, right? He's like the counterpart of our god. And then one day, like the world is on a drought, and there's a monster, and then there's a box of thunderbolts, and the guy, you know, the god Indra throws the thunderbolt on the monster blows up and water comes everywhere, blah, 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 blah. And then he thinks, oh my God, I'm such a great person. What a great boy I am. I'm going to build this big old palace in my name. And, you know, he's working on it. And people are complaining because he's just aggrandizing himself, right? And then, you know, he goes to a god, plays to another one. And then this little blue boy comes in and says, oh, this is a nice palace. Yeah. And he says, you know, nobody before you have built a palace like this. And he's like, what do you mean no God before me? I'm the only God. And he's like, no, you're not. There's been millions and millions of other gods before you.
He broke this guy. He broke him.
And he broke him. Because the reality is that existentially, you're not the only one that has achieved that level of success. Yeah. You're not the only one that feels that they're superior to the next person.
And I think that's where we fall short there. Yeah. Because we think we are.
And that's the reason why you have the separation, because you begin to think, I am better than the other person.
Right.
You know, my religion is better than yours.
Right.
My team is better than yours.
And
my race is better than yours. My country is better than yours. You start having all these parallels that at the end of the day, it really just dismembers all the stuff that we have evolved. But what's going to happen eventually is that we'll get to a point, because we're hard-headed, that we're all going to say, this is not worth it. We've learned that during World War II. At the end of it, it's like, this extremism, it's not worth it. That's not good. And we can't forget those type of things, because history keeps repeating itself if we don't go back and revisit it.
Right.
Yep.
It sounds like we could make a whole nother episode of this.
No, I mean, my biggest thing, and it's what I suggest people to do, is that you have to start thinking for yourself, and you have to understand how pivotal and important you are, and you taking responsibility for your life, even if it is minute. Even if you're working at a train station and all you're doing is saying good morning to people, that matters. Even if you go to a post office, right? Before people went postal, you go to a post office, just be nice to people. Mm-hmm. It's like you're gonna end up dead just like everybody else, and you don't know exactly where we're all heading. But if you do that, and you're in a position in which you could bring a little bit of joy and different, don't worry about the idea. It's the person in front of you that really matters. That's the reality of it all. And that's the only way that our species is going to continue. It's going to destroy itself. Where it's going to head, nobody knows, and nobody can predict that.
Well, that's a good place to end.
That is a good place to end.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts.
No problem.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Please check us out on all of our social media outlets. Check us out on YouTube, where you'll find this video. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, subscribe, like, and share.